Hello everyone, my name is Rob. This is Thaco Thoughts. Now, the reason I'm calling this podcast Thaco Thoughts is because the emphasis will be on second edition, with occasional forays into Beck and splash of first edition, but the emphasis is on second edition. Now, my goal is to go into the cracks and crevices that I feel that other podcasts either don't want to tread or just have a thought about. Hopefully, I will accomplish that mission. The first thing I want to do is introduce myself to kind of build my credentials, or to introduce my credentials. So I've been gaming for 30 years, 30 plus years. I think I was first introduced in 1989. So I kind of came in when first edition was starting to go over to second edition. And I remember when my first gaming experience was actually playing first edition. This kid next door basically introduced me to the game. It was kind of a ridiculous situation. It was basically us sitting in his room. I'm playing a fighter who is fighting hordes of dragons. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I just know I'm rolling the dice and I'm having a great time. And I was pretty much hooked ever since. Later on, I basically got into a second edition game, and we melded first and second edition together. I mean, with no issues whatsoever. I remember playing a lot of first level characters in the second edition game. I remember playing like a first edition monk. I remember playing a cavalier at one point, and we had no issues with it. I mean, at least I didn't know. I didn't know enough back then to know that there was a real difference. Let me put it that way. But anyway, so I basically cut my teeth on second edition way back in the day. That was my number one game back then. And then later on, Palladium and World of Darkness and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so I have been gaming for many decades. And I've learned a lot of hard lessons along the way. And what else can you do? Let's learn and grow, right? But anyway, so in this first podcast, I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is Thaco. Okay, so why am I bringing up Thaco? Isn't this kind of subject beat to death? Well, the reason that I don't think it's beat to death enough, because I have never been satisfied with many of the explanations concerning Thaco. So the first thing we're going to do, we are going to read directly from the book what Thaco is, according to this book. Okay? And then I'm going to tell you why you should just ignore it. So, figuring the 2-hit number on page 119. The first step in making an attack roll is to find the number needed to hit the target. Subtract the armor class of the target from the attacker's Thaco. Remember that if the armor class is a negative number, you add to the attacker's Thaco. The character has to roll the resulting number or higher on a 1d20 to hit the target. You may be asking, well, why is that controversial? The reason I don't like that explanation is because it makes a couple of assumptions. First assumption is that the player is going to know the armor class of their target, okay? Which is unnecessary, okay? And then the other emphasis is the adding or subtracting. You don't need to do that either, okay? One of the issues that I have with Thaco is that everybody seems to think it's complicated. How many times have you been on forums or just talking to people, and the number one reason they say that they poo-poo Thaco is because they tell you how complicated it is. They start talking about charts and formulas, and they make it into some sort of advanced math equation. It's not. Far from it. Matter of fact, I've seen a lot of Thaco videos that emphasize what they believe is simplifying Thaco, and unfortunately, it might work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that what they're doing is technically wrong, but they can whittle it down even more. to the point where Thaco is barely math. It is, and I will emphasize this, Thaco is easier than Ascending Armor class. Way easier. It's just been taught wrong. Because when you're doing Ascending Armor class, what are you having to do? Every single thing, you're having to do math. You're adding numbers, or you might be subtracting numbers. You're trying to hit the difficulty class, whatever it happens to be for that particular edition. But the point is, you are doing more math when you do Ascending Armor class. Thaco, it's pre-calculated, okay? The player does not need to know anything except their Thaco and what they roll, and then they compare. You don't need to know your enemy's armor class. You don't need to know situation modifiers. You don't need to know anything except what your Thaco is and what you, right? So, if you have, of course, a Thaco of 18 and you roll a 16, what's the difference? 2. So you tell the Dungeon Master, I hit an armor class 2. That's it. The Dungeon Master, if they're doing their jobs, will know what the armor class of the Orc is, or the Beholder, whatever it happens to be. The Dungeon Master knows what you need to hit, all right? Even like the situational modifiers that I brought up, like, for example, higher ground, whatever happens, you don't need to adjust your Thaco at all. The Dungeon Master should adjust the enemy's armor class. Now, does this put a little bit more emphasis on the Dungeon Master keeping up with things? Sure, but it's easy stuff. I mean, you know good and well that if something has an armor class of 4 and it's worsened by 2, then now it's an armor class 6. No big deal, right? Now, from the Dungeon Master's point of view, this is a great thing because you don't have to give information to the player at all. Okay, you don't have to sit there and say, "Oh, well, the armor class." You don't have. There's no negotiating here. There's no having to explain to the player anything. They just tell you what armor class they hit, and you decide whether that's good enough. Because from the Dungeon Master's point of view, you control that number. You control that armor class, pure and simple. Okay. If somebody, let's say, rolled 1 less to hit, for example, you can just decide, oh, well, they hit anyway, because you can make up a reason. You can say, well, yeah, they're wearing plate armor, but it's really beat up and decrepit, so I just let them hit it, right? But the point is that the Dungeon Master has complete control of what the player knows, and the player doesn't have to worry about anything but they roll. And think about this. The only time that you have to adjust Thaco is there's 2 times. One, if you get a permanent magical bonus. So obviously, if you start out with a Thaco of 20 and you get a +1 sword, well, now for that particular weapon, for that particular sword, your armor class, the Thaco is now 19. Or, of course, if you go up in a level. So, once more, to emphasize, no formulas, no mantras, no trying to figure things out. Just note the difference between what your Thaco is and what you roll. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And it makes things go a lot faster. It makes things go a lot smoother. It gives control where control is needed. And yeah, and then you'll find that it flows a lot easier. And so then when people are trying to make fun of 2nd edition, and they're trying to say, well, Thaco's so difficult, so hard, it's all mathematical equations, and you're like, no, you can explain to them how simple it is. And, to show people that you don't need a college degree in math to do Thaco. And you can show them that it's actually easier than Ascending Armor class. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. And I look forward to our next little session. Have a good day.